When God sends rain, he just pours it on everybody. And Holy Spirit love is the same way. It's just poured out wherever you are. Who gets Holy Spirit love? Wherever you are, the person around you gets it. There's a woman that was a pioneer in children's ministry. She was doing it before anyone else. Her name was Henrietta Mears. And in her lifetime, she saw a lot of young men and women enter ministry. And she was asked as an older lady, what was the secret to your success? She said, I tried to imagine every child that would walk into my class had a name tag and it said, hello, my name is, please help me feel important. What counts is loving people unnaturally. Which means we're going to have to learn to love supernaturally. And the best place to start is your church family. Some things you learn first at home. My wife and I have nephews and nieces that were homeschooled. And when our children would go and visit their cousins, they noticed that their cousins did not go to school the way our children understood it. So coming back from one of those visits, our 6-year-old at the time, Matthew, who could be a little overly dramatic, was having a morning where he did not want to go to school. And he said to his mother, why can't I be house trained? Well, we have house trained all our children because some things you learn first in the family. And this is what the Holy Spirit does. Not just lift our love, but the Holy Spirit gifts our love. Now, I told you that 1 Corinthians 13 is the longest text in the Bible on what love looks like. Keep it in context. I told you I'm good at math. Chapter 13 comes right after chapter 12 and right before chapter 14. And all three of those chapters are Paul giving counsel to the church in Corinth about the use of spiritual gifts. See, one way the Holy Spirit gives us a supernatural empowerment to love is through a supernatural endowment for love. In other words, do you realize that every time you come to church, you should bring a gift with you? A few years ago, my wife and I got on an airplane, and in came a young family with a couple of small kids. And they started handing out baggies to everyone on their row and the rows in front of them and the rows right after them. And we got a baggie, and it was full of pieces of candy and earplugs. And they basically said, we're sorry, it's going to be noisy. Thank you for your patience. When you come to church, you should bring a gift with you. And you have a gift. Let me show you that. This is how chapter 12 starts. Now, dear brothers and sisters, regarding your question about the special abilities the Spirit gives us, I don't want you to misunderstand this. There are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit is the source of them all. And please notice, a spiritual gift is given to some of you? No. A spiritual gift is given to each of you. Why? So that we can help each other. It's God's will that we learn about spiritual gifts so that we will use them in accordance with God's will. So that we won't think the purpose of the gift is to puff myself up, but the purpose of my gift is to build you up. Because having the gift is not the point. The point is using the gift to love somebody. So Paul talks about in chapter 12, you have different gifts, not the same gift. And just like in your body, the eye isn't jealous because it's not an ear, and the hand isn't jealous because it's not a foot. You all have different gifts. You're not jealous of this. Desire to use your gifts. But he closes a chapter with this line, and I will show you the most excellent way. And that is how we get to chapter 13. In the middle of talking about spiritual gifts, he starts talking about the way of love, because love is the only way to do anything that counts. And when you look at his definition of love, what does it look like? Love is patient, love is kind. It's never rude, doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Sounds like the fruit of the Spirit. That the Holy Spirit's love has been poured into your heart, and now it's splashing out on other people. And you love these people because he's given you a gift to give them. And then he starts chapter 14 with these words. You follow the way of love. And how do we do that? Look at the next phrase. Eagerly desire gifts of the Spirit, especially prophecy. Okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes and go on an excursion that probably needs about 2 sermons. Because in this section, Paul is comparing prophecy to another gift of the Spirit called tongues. Now, what's the gift of tongues? Well, in Acts 2, the gift seems to be either speaking in a foreign language or speaking and people are hearing in a foreign language. And in Acts 2, the gift of tongues is to bless others with hearing the gospel. But there seems to be in that chapter 14 another kind of spiritual gift of tongues where someone has a language they use when they pray to God. Some people call it a prayer language. I came to this church in 1989, and since I have been at this church, we've had people in our church with this gift, including elders and ministers. Now, I do not have that gift. I have gifts, but not that gift. I don't feel less than anyone who has it. I don't feel more than anyone. We each have our gift. Now, at our church, though, if you do have that gift of a prayer language, we ask you to use it in your prayer closet, not in the big assembly. Why? Look at verse 4. Anyone who speaks in a tongue edifies themselves, but the one who prophesies edifies the church. It's a beautiful thing to edify yourself, but when you come to church, you bring a gift to build up other people. So use those gifts. Now, I know some of you are brand new Christians, and this is all very new to you. I also know some of you did not grow up in churches that talked about gifts. This might be a little disconcerting to you because you're afraid if we start using spiritual gifts here, some people will be puffed up and proud, and it'll lead to showiness and weirdness. Okay, let me just say, trust me, 47 years of pastoring. People who are weird with the Holy Spirit are weird without the Holy Spirit, okay? I'm sorry, that sounds a little judgmental, but it's the absolute truth. I understand that some people can misuse their gifts because they're seeking validation and not edification. This is what Paul is dealing with in chapters 12 and 14. But he doesn't clean up the mess of immature people using their gifts by saying, just stop it. The right response to misuse is not disuse. It is proper use. Because there's something much worse than being in a church where a few immature people misuse their spiritual gift. It is being in a church that leads you to think that Jesus is essential, but operating in the power of the Holy Spirit is optional. That keeps the whole church immature. So I'm thankful that ever since I've been at this church, people have encouraged and built me up by using their gifts. I have received many prophetic words that have built me up. I have many times received words of encouragement. Paul says that's a gift, Romans 12. He also says, Romans 12, there's a gift of generosity. And there have been times, especially some years ago, when people with that gift really encouraged my family with their generosity. There's a gift of faith. Have you ever come to church and, man, you're just struggling, you're doubting, and someone comes up to you and they're like, they've got the faith gift. And it's like they loan you some of their faith to help you keep believing. That's a beautiful gift. And so we have these different gifts that we can use that have blessed me time and time again. I've heard people say church is boring. Let me tell you, it's only boring if you're a spectator and you came expecting a show and you didn't like the show. What if you came not as a spectator but as a participant? What if you came to church wondering and praying, Lord, who you want me to love today? Because I'm available. What if you prayed, Lord, who can I build up today? And then you walked in expectant faith. What might be unleashed in our church if that's how we came to church? I know one thing, it would not be boring. I think it would be beautiful. I've learned this. I've learned that you can't grow a church in loving people just by preaching about it. Why should you want to operate in the dimension of your gift? Because you love people. And the Holy Spirit has given you the ability to love them at a whole new level. To love people more radically. And the result is that even the unbeliever recognizes this is not natural. And he ends that chapter by saying that unbeliever will fall down and worship God, explaining God is really among you. Because our greatest witness is love from above. We need to remember that, church. Many churches today are eager to have power. They're compromising to get political power. We don't change the world by cutting off people's ears, but by putting ears back on people. We are not in love with power. We believe in the power of love. And a lot of the things that churches do, you can find in other places. But there's no place you can go and experience Holy Spirit love except the church of Jesus Christ. And Jesus said, this is how they're going to know who you are. They're not going to know who we are by our doctrine. Doctrine's important, but unbelievers don't know truth from lies. They're not going to know who we are by our ethics. Ethics matter, but unbelievers don't know what's right and what's wrong. But even an unbeliever can recognize when love isn't natural. It's at a whole different level. That's our best witness.